some of you may have seen this. The FDA, the Food and Drug Administration here in the United States, their tobacco division sent out a tweet yesterday saying that tomorrow at 12:59 p.m. Eastern Time is the deadline for responses for their request for information that they say can help them address the recent lung injury associated with the use of e-cigarettes and vaping products. Yes, lung injury with e-cigarettes and vaping products. Let's take some time really quick to just unpack this. And let's start from what they're actually talking about. If you've been following tobacco harm reduction at all within the last year, you've probably heard the term EVALI, E-V-A-L-I. And that stands for e-cigarette or vaping use associated lung injury. This was the disease that caused hospitalizations in all 50 of the states here in the US, as well as the death of over 60 individuals beginning in June of last year. Now, the FDA and the CDC, the Center for Disease Control here in the United States, were quick to warn everybody about all vaping products. They believed that this may have been the cause, and they very quickly said, don't do any of this. Don't use any alternative nicotine products, any of that. However, the New England Journal of Medicine in December of last year said that the culprit of that outbreak was not just vaping products, it wasn't e-cigarettes, but instead it was something called vitamin E acetate. Now, that is a thickening agent that is added to black market THC vape cartridges. While the CDC and the FDA did eventually admit that indeed vitamin E acetate was strongly linked, by that time, well, the news had already gone out. We've had months of news cycles talking about how vaping equals lung injury. The term EVALI itself features e-cigarette right at the beginning, though there have been zero proven cases that the use of regulated alternative nicotine vapor technology leads to any lung injury, and especially not any death. And while this some people might be listening to this and like, well, this is just something that happens in the US. That's just that. It doesn't actually impact the world. Public health policy around the globe doesn't work that way. Most countries do not have the resources or the budget to be able to form their own CDC or FDA. And so the language that is used by those agencies is quite often parroted by different government agencies, leading to different policy decisions. President Duterte, like I spoke about earlier, he cited this exact outbreak as the reason to potentially ban all of those products in the Philippines. When we went to Colombia to speak with tobacco harm reduction advocates across Ibero-America, they also kept coming back to this EVALI and what people were talking about. Even though there had been proof that it was not about those products, that's what we had. We spoke with Tomas O'Gorman from Mexico. And while we were in Colombia speaking to him in February, the president of Mexico cited and parroted old information, not updated, saying that that was the reason why that country should ban those products as well. And we know that the age-old adage is true, that the retraction never quite has as much power as the original story. And so that brings us to this FDA request for comment. The reason that they are doing that is because Congress asked that agency to identify and evaluate additional steps that the FDA could take to address the recent pulmonary illnesses, again, associated with e-cigarettes and vaping products. And while that call is very specifically asking for comment about products, about different studies that the FDA may not have seen, that have not been filed and indexed quite yet, we believe that Congress and the FDA are missing a very strong point. And that point is that language matters. And we are not alone in that. Scott Gottlieb, who is a former FDA head, tweeted in January that the organization comes up with precise nomenclature to be able to distinguish between products, to avoid any confusion by consumers or by other countries, for instance. And by not using precise language, this actually causes more confusion. And there are studies that back him up as well. On this program back in March, we discussed a study that was commissioned by Public Health England that showed that these false fears the false fears around e-cigarettes, believing that they may be as dangerous as combustible tobacco, has led almost half of those people that smoke in the UK to wrongly believe that they are as dangerous, and it stops people from making that switch. This is how misinformation spreads, and this is how misinformation can be deadly. And we believe that this is completely avoidable. So what we want to do is encourage you out there watching right now to make sure that your voice is heard. If you go to vida.news/FDA comment, you will see essentially what I'm talking about right now. You will also see a direct link to be able to go to the FDA's website to leave a comment. We actually also put a paragraph there for you in case you just want to be able to copy and paste. It is very important that the FDA understands that their language and the way that they frame this question and this problem matters. We do not want to see illicit products. We want to make sure that the right focus is put in the right place and that the policies and the language that the FDA sets out does not have unintended consequences that lead to avoidable deaths around the world. As Clive Bates said on our program last week, public health experts need to pay attention to users' voices. They cannot just toss them aside as anecdotal. And as he said, when 10,000 people speak, you should listen. So please go to vida.news/FDA comment and do that. The deadline is tomorrow at 11:59 Eastern. Right now, there's just over 100 comments, and I fully believe that we can make sure that our voices are heard.